be unconventional in this discussion. You started with a very provocative question, which really was, I think, intended to have us thinking beyond what we are used to. And in this case, I think the panelists have gone along the lines of things we are used to. And I start with the point you made when you were asking the question of preference between the markets and the aid. And I think there was grossing over the problem, and people saying, you see, we need both, and it was as if there was none that was better than the other, and so on and so forth. This is a blunder. Number one, first of all, this question can only be asked in Africa, not in any other region of this world. Which in itself tells you that there is something wrong even with the way people are arguing the case. Because it is now a given that aid and capital markets, are the same. You see, it's not, you can't say you don't need this. I mean, first, aid is more political than anything else. Markets are less political, markets are neutral.
Hello EDUSPLORERs, thanks for joining us again and welcome back to another informative video on our YouTube channel. On today's episode, we are looking at the benefits of aid within the African continent. Actually, does aid really work? Has aid actually transformed the African continent? Looking at the different professionals, this is the debate that the African continent professionals and also high-ranking officials in different areas should be looking at. And also, the young entrepreneurs and business people should focus on if actually aid has transformed the African continent. What we're looking at, if you compare aid and markets, these are like apples and oranges. These are two different things you're looking at. Africa actually needs both markets, not aid, because aid hasn't done anything over the past couple of decades. Looking at the different contributions that have flowed into the African continent, you can't really tell if actually where has this money gone to. Of course, there are wonderful things that support coming from other international agencies, from the UN and different organizations to support things like flood in Darfur and other things about hunger in South Sudan, different areas that have been resolved. These professionals are doing a wonderful job to support those people who are hard to reach in terms of disaster in different areas. So we commend that, looking at those different challenges, those immediate interactions or immediate actions that are needed to support the continent in different areas. However, if you consider that aid is going to be the way Africa is going to move forward, that's something which is a debate that everyone is ready to have, to kind of discuss it, to see the benefit, to see the negative side of it. If Africa needs to transform its system to move to a different direction, what we look into, considering that aid will not actually move the continent if it hasn't done so in the past couple of decades rather, aid actually would instead slow Africa in different ways. We will get into that in a moment. However, markets will bring in competition. Markets will actually bring in development in different areas. Market will bring growth within the African continent, development, manufacturing in different areas. It will also bring competitive approach within the African continent. Different countries can compete among themselves. New entrepreneurs will get into the whole systems, and you'll be able to see creativity that will come in. And also, countries begin to feel confident in the products they can develop by themselves. Also, Markets will attract new businesses in those countries. Inter-regional trade will move ahead. The African people will feel relief and they are able to take things in their own direction and also create products that could be consumed within. Markets will also kind of give freedom to the African businesses, the entrepreneurs, the government who are able to interact with private sector to scale things further. Aid would not actually look into those areas. For those of you who want to understand a little bit more as to the impact that aid has had within the African continent, aid is just, for example, it's a financial financing area where that money is being distributed among developing countries with the aim of promoting economic development and also welfare in those particular countries that receive the money. The money that flows into, for example, in this case, the African continent, comes not only from individual governments, from international donors to those government aid, but also from international development programs such as the World Bank and also the IMF, where this particular money, using this international agency, being channeled as intermediaries between the donor government and also the receiving governments in those African countries. Experts have even argued that in the North Share, aid has instead brought in things like corruption and also dependency in different way. It strengthened corruption in those countries where it's already been widespread. Unfortunately, when you look into that, these cases, most of them are in Sub Saharan Africa. The largest recipients of foreign aid are in Sub Saharan Africa, looking at the data, which happens to be where the world's lowest ranked countries in many areas of governance are, especially when in terms of corruption, according to infrastructure and in different areas. Looking at Transparency International, this shows that foreign aid simply reinforces the amount of resources available to already corrupt specific elite groups within the region, thus tipping the key balance of power into the hands of executive's branch of government. There's also a clear correlation between the increasing aid statistically with an increasing corruption. This is the reason why I believe that the president of Rwanda is actually explaining this, that Africa need markets, not aid, because aid is not going to solve the problem if it hasn't done for so many years. The money is not being distributed evenly among the population or being used to promote growth and to help the poor, but instead it's being used to buy equipment for different things or being channeled to elephant projects, kind of dishonest procurement, which are not helping the people that badly need it. It's also being used by some leaders as a shortcut for policies that they want to achieve during their presidency. And also the size of government is being grown as a result of this particular money. That contribution is coming from abroad. Another consequences for this particular thing about talking about aid and dependency, African countries, some of those countries become dependent. These countries have become so used to receiving such large sums of money that they don't even promote local businesses because they have free cash coming in and their own disposal. If we consider the impact that aid would have in this particular region, then the businesses and also officials need to kind of change the strategy to consider aid as a tool that is not bringing any growth. It is instead causing or increasing the level of dependency of the African continent. We would like to know what you feel, if aid is actually growing the African continent, or you feel that aid hasn't made any impact. Also, the discussion is ongoing and the people are talking. Let us know what you think about this.
Look at the rest of the world. The only thing you're talking about, why you highlight aid, sometimes that to the point that if you say anything about aid, it may be used against you. You see, this is the only place we can be having this conversation. But at the same time, the panelist from Tanzania has made a good point. He illustrated all kinds of wealth lying all over the place from Africa and being recycled to us in a form of aid and then, you know, in the end telling you, you know, you must be humble, you must keep quiet. Don't say some of these things. Markets are markets. we know what they have for us, outweighing what we have in aid by thousands of times, please. So why do we leave something here that we know is more important for us by any measure and account? And then we start saying, no, but let's not even make a comparison. You see, we need both, you know. Okay.
Well, another thing is that many people will ask the question like, why are they keep giving if the aid is not working? It's basically not working when you look at the amount of money that came in over the past couple of decades. There are no development projects that you will confirm. These are not compared to charity groups are doing wonderful work in different areas. They are supporting communities that badly need the money. But in terms of growing in an extent where it makes the continent become more competitive, is aid answering that question? It is supporting those regions, those regional governments, for them to implement those particular projects. But this is not the case. This makes African countries look like a helpless civilization by just letting kind of elites and also colonial history also plays a huge role in terms of foreign aid processes. When you look into context on how this affects the continent, which is a good debate that Africans need to start having to kind of shape the narrative. For example, France tends to give a lot to its former colonies as a consequence of guilt of the past. Australia, for example, and Nordic countries have a tendency to not actually giving the way they want, or they're like unlikely, like France and the UK. They choose to give only to the less corrupt countries because they have no colonial legacies, thus freeing them from political pressure. They make a decision. Norway, Scandinavian countries, Australia, they do not really have to an extent compared to countries like France and Britain that they do have, for example, specifically France, having more colonial colonies in Africa. So this actually have some ties. It doesn't really show that example that the continent has moved. For example, step aside a little bit, looking at the European Economic Community, which actually turned to European Union now. They actually were against the dictatorship of the Spanish regime and Greece and Portugal prior to the membership at the time to joining European Union, only allowing those countries, that Spain, Greece and Portugal, to enter the union once they had democratized their system. Perhaps if the International Monetary Fund and also the World Bank should also do something similar as a result to kind of making sure that these aid are tied to good governance, also making sure that those financial assistance are aligned to specific areas which make the difference, that the common people in the continent can feel that the money is coming in. Then you'll begin to see the impact of these particular donations that come into the continent. So far, I believe that aid is doing its basics, but it hasn't changed the continent for it to become more competitive in the world. Not at all now. The fact in the matter is this is not actually working in those different areas, because if it was working, we won't be talking about this. It is clear that aid is not actually working. It's not driving the continent forward. Aid is doing a wonderful job in different areas. Different NGOs are doing their best to kind of push things in emergency situation, as we've pointed out. However, if aid isn't working, then it needs to be reconstructed. If global actors can help, then they must also at least not make things worse in those different areas by pumping in money in there. New policies and incentives can be put together to show progress rather than failures. Aid needs to be converted into trade. Aid will be much better if it's emergency situation. However, markets will be what the African continent will need. Capabilities of the citizens of the African continent needs to be created so that they can become creators of wealth and also creators of enterprises, so that they can live from their own activities. Throughout the complete policy and also decent economic management matters more than foreign aid for developing countries. In this case, the African continent will better act well and also become competitive by focusing on market. Stable and strong institutions avoid aid from becoming a curse. There should be also assistance in improving governance before financial assistance, because without a strong governance, the financial assistance will not fulfill the desired goal that is meant for. So we looking at this area. If you feel that aid is the way forward for the African continent to become competitive, to become the next China, we would like to hear from you. If you feel that African entrepreneurs and young professionals can grow, can expand, test their expertise and also create new businesses and jobs, the young professionals and also the continent's dynamic will transform by using more of markets, by focusing on growth and development, focusing on expansion and also creating new businesses and also working for themselves. If this is something that will push the African continent forward, we would also like to hear from you from the comment section. Otherwise, we want to thank you for watching. We're looking forward to meeting you in our next episode. And don't forget to watch our other videos. And thanks very much. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.